Hey guys, Yuta here with the third and final part of my Hearthstone new format prediction series. Before I get started, I want to point you guys over to Sumadin's article over at Go Through Gamers. It's in the description below. He talks about the issues that could belie the new format, so go check that out. It's a pretty good read. Now, in part 2, I talked about the cards that are going to be going away, the most important cards that are going to be going away, and whether or not they could be replaced, and if so, what could they be replaced with. In part 3, this part, we're talking about what decks those cards affect the most, what decks are going to survive, which decks are going away, obviously barring nerfs to the existing cards or, cards that come in to help them in the expansion to keep them afloat. Now, what do I mean by survive? Basically any deck that can be competitive on the ladder, maybe a very good player can even get it to legendary, but something that can at least compete, something you're not going to have a horrible time getting any wins at all. A pretty easy example of something that's not going to survive is Mage. I dare anyone to try to get legendary with the amazing synergy of Harvest Golem into Gorilla Bot, maybe throw some Demolishers in there, but yeah, it's probably not going to work out for you. So we're going to be going over a lot of the decks here, and I've listed most of the decks I believe that have been strong, or are strong right now, or have been strong recently. I might have missed a couple, hopefully I didn't, but yeah, basically some of these weird out there decks I haven't really included. For example, let's start with Druid. Let's go in alphabetical order. I have aggro and mid-range Druid as the decks that are common and popular right now. Obviously, Ramp Druid is a thing. Mill Druid was a thing, but no need to waste time with those kinds of out there decks. So starting with aggro / mid-range Druid, and what cards have they lost? They've lost Shade of Naxxramas, they've lost Pilot Treader, they've lost Dr. Boom in both of them. And as far as aggro Druid, they lost Fel Reaver, and there could be a Juggler nerf, there could be a Savage Roar nerf for both of them. But I want to talk about Dr. Boom because this is the last time basically I'm going to be this is the last time I'm going to be talking about Dr. Boom for the rest of this video, because Dr. Boom is similarly strong in every single deck, and it's also similarly feared from every single deck, right? And you could basically put it in every single deck. You could even put it in aggro Shaman. Wouldn't be a good idea, but wouldn't be the worst idea either, right? Basically, Dr. Boom could go in everything. But no deck really utilizes it as well as Druid, right? A lot of times, obviously just getting Dr. Boom on the field is super powerful, but when Druid gets it on the field, they're threatening 29 damage with combo. And it makes it so that you have to deal with all the parts of it. It just makes it so much stronger than any other deck out there. So I decided to put Dr. Boom in here because I think that proportionately Druid's going to get more weak in comparison to some of the other decks out there. So that's why I have Dr. Boom listed for Druid. It's not going to be mentioned for any of the other classes. And another thing to keep in mind too is when you're dealing with Dr. Boom from other classes, sometimes you can just ignore the boom bots, for instance, and if they don't have a great trade for themselves, for instance, on a big game hunter, maybe you have a taunt in the way, then you can get the damage in elsewhere and let your opponent trade with you. Whereas against Druid, that's not really a good idea, because even if they don't have lethal damage to your face, they can use Savage Roar as a pretty good tool for removal, and that makes those boom bots even stronger. So again, Dr. Boom, stronger than Druid than in other classes, so that's why I have it listed here. I also have Shredder listed here. I have it listed for some other classes as well, because it's stronger in some classes than others, but obviously it's pretty strong in Druid as well, because you get a Shredder on the field and you're threatening 20 damage with combo. So a Shredder pretty good for Druid as well. Obviously it's very sticky for that reason. And for aggro Druid, there is Fel Reaver. Obviously that's going away, but you can replace it with something else that's pretty aggressive. Right now the aggro variants are running one Savage Combatant or one Argent Horse Rider, so you can just kind of put those in instead. And Savage Combatant, as I mentioned before, since it doesn't have to compete with Shredder, it's a really good card as well. Could go up in value. So I think that aggro Druid is going to be okay, and mid-range Druid is going to be okay as well, barring some sort of crazy nerfs going up forward. So both of those are going to survive. Let's move on to Hunter. Now, Hunter had a few decks, kind of 2.5, with Phase Hunter, Mid-Range Hunter, and Hybrid Hunter. And the biggest cards that those classes are missing, or those decks, are going to be missing, are Web Spinner, Mad Scientist, Hollow Creeper, Shredder's a pretty good aggressive card. I mean, the more aggressive your deck is, it kind of helps out, right? And Glaive Zuka. Now, obviously, Web Spinner and Mad Scientist are big hits to these decks, but a lot of times, you know, it wasn't like you kind of wanted to get out secrets at a certain time. Sometimes you wanted to get explosive if you wanted to deal with a certain board from your opponent, and it was really difficult if you want to get it from Mad Scientist anyway. So and then also the secrets cost 2, so it's not that horrible. Obviously, Haunted Creeper is really good in Hunter in proportion in comparison to other classes because of the fact that just having it in its full form is very dangerous because it can get buffed by Houndmaster. You can use it for kill command, so it's a bit more dangerous. If you put it in other classes, sometimes you could just ignore the Haunted Creeper until you're ready to deal with it, whereas it's very dangerous to leave it there when the Hunter's using it. So that's a big hit, obviously, with Haunted Creeper. You might see the return of something like Crocolisk or something like that. Web Spinner, obviously, a pretty big hit. But as we've mentioned a lot of the classes are, basically everything's going to be getting weaker overall. And I can still see Face Hunter being a thing. You can just basically put as much, you know, you can just put a lot of aggressive options in there. It should still be fine. I think Face Hunter is always going to be a thing that's around. And mid-range Hunters, obviously, I think it's going to stick around as well. You still have your cards like Savannah Highmane and your really devastating cards like just your mid-range cards that you can just put in there and kind of threaten that damage toward the end. So, in conclusion, I think that both of them are going to stick around. Depending on what cards they get in new expansion, they could be kind of pushed down to like the lower tiers, but I don't think they're going anywhere as far as just going to trash tier. Let's move on to Mage. Now, the Mage kind of archetypes right now that are popular are Mech, Tempo, and Freeze. Obviously, there's things like Grinder Mage and, you know, Giants Mage, all that kind of stuff, but we're just going to talk about these three for now. Right off the bat, Mech Mage is dead. Unless they somehow replenish all the mechs in the new expansion, Mech Mage is completely dead. Talking about Tempo Mage, they're losing Flame Cannon, Unstable Portal, and in general, all the classes are losing, or all the Freeze, or all the Mage archetypes, are losing Mad Scientist. And for the Freeze and kind of grinderish Mages, they're losing Healbot, Explosive Sheep, and Duplicate, and also Echo of Medivh, obviously. So the Grinder Mages are dead. Tempo Mage, is kind of hard to see them surviving without Unstable Portal or Flame Cannon. Obviously, you can put 2 Arcane Blasts, 2 Arcane Missiles, and Mirror Image in there to kind of help out that early game, but a lot of times those decks that have those cards, they really run dry really quickly. And you want... the nice thing about Unstable Portal was that you could just play a spell for no other reason than just playing it out there, right? You could just play out your Unstable Portal. Sometimes it costs 1, you get a couple of shots off, and everything's good. It's a really cheap way to just have an excuse to play a spell, and usually you get a pretty good minion out of it. Now, and if you put Arcane Blast or something crazy like that into your deck just to get a spell, it feels really bad to just throw it out there and have it really do nothing, unlike Unstable Portal, which actually did something. Obviously, Flame Cannon was very powerful as well. It wouldn't have to deal with things like Shade anymore, but still, it was a pretty good option for getting rid of things. So, I'm thinking that Tempo Mage is probably going to die, but I've never been the biggest practitioner of it in the first place, so you might see some innovation to keep it alive, you never know. Freeze Mage is going to probably stick around. Mad Scientist is a really big deal, though. A lot of Freeze Mage players will tell you that basically Mad Scientist revived Freeze Mage. Before Mad Scientist came around, it was really hard to deal with all the nerfs to all the cards. For people who don't know, Frost Nova used to be 2. Everything used to cost less. Kona Cold was 3. Blizzard was 5. And it was really hard to make a deck that worked without the Mad Scientist to really get you that tempo, right? Because back in the day, you had to really, you know, kind of utilize your mana really carefully, right? A lot of times people, if you're playing Phase Mage, you would get behind, and it would be hard to figure out whether or not you wanted to play Arcane Intellect or play a Secret, because you might not have time later to do it, especially since you wanted to develop certain other things. So I think that Freeze Mage is going to stick around, particularly because you have Thaurissan to help it out, and also because Zoo is going to be a thing that's always going to be around, and Freeze Mage is going to get better at dealing with Zoo, as we'll talk about later once we get there. So, in conclusion, Mech dead, Temple probably dead, Freeze. It's gonna hurt a bit, but I think it's gonna stick around. Let's move on to Paladin. Give me 1 second here. Let's move on to Paladin. The current Paladin decks that are in the meta are Secret Paladin, Midrange Paladin, and Warlock Paladin. Obviously, midrange you're not really seeing at all. And Secret Paladin right now, the most popular Secret Paladin is the midrange variant, right? Even if you have Divine Favor, it still plays like a midrange deck. You've seen a lot of rags in the deck, all that kind of stuff. So lots of stuff they're missing out on here. So Minibot's gone, Muster for Battle's gone, Zombie Chow's gone, Belcher's gone, Healbot's gone, Haunted Creeper's gone, although I didn't really like that in Secret Paladin anyway, but that's gone. Loatheb's gone, and obviously I mentioned in part 2 that Loatheb affects, you know, more aggressive decks and more controlling decks kind of equally, but it's kind of important in Secret Paladin, and I'll tell you why in a second. Shredder's gone, Avenge is gone, Coghammer's gone, and Quartermaster is gone. Now let's go over them one by one, I suppose. Minibot, Muster, Coghammer. With all those gone, there's really no early game for Paladin. So I think that midrange Paladin is basically dead, and midrange Secret Paladin is dead. And I think the only thing that can really survive is aggro Secret Paladin, which is not really played right now, but basically a lot more aggressive. Use, you know, things like Leper Gnome. You basically just play all the cards out of your hand, and then you Divine Favor. That includes secrets, obviously, since they're very cheap. And you still have the Mysterious Challenger, but there's no Avenge, which is obviously very painful. And I was going to talk about Loatheb. Basically, Loatheb, it's so powerful in Secret. It was so powerful in Secret Paladin because you play it on 5. If your opponent has the coin, they really want to prepare for the Mysterious Challenger coming up. You play Loatheb, they're not able to prepare. They can maybe play some minions, but maybe they didn't really want to play minions there. And then you play Mysterious Challenger on 6. It's just so devastating. It's basically more devastating than other decks as far as having Loatheb in the deck. And yeah, let's move on to Avenge. Avenge is... It just takes so much power out of the Mysterious Challenger, not having the Avenge there. And Avenge was something that you could play early on as well, and it was so powerful because it was just so scary to remove minions off the field because it made their board stronger, right? So now it's going to be easier to deal with the Mysterious Challenger. It's also going to be easier to deal with minions on the board because you're not afraid of the Avenge kind of buffing things, right? And on top of that, with the Shredder going away as well, that was a really big target for Redemption. It was also very powerful, obviously, because, you know, with things getting buffed, having such a sticky minion around really made things much more annoying for Paladin to deal with. So, in conclusion, midrange Paladin going away, Secret midrange Paladin going away, aggro Secret Paladin could still be a thing, but it might not be very strong. Warlock Paladin is sticking around. Obviously, you have Healbot that's going away, but I'm going to talk about this later as well. Tournament Medic, it might be the replacement for Healbot. Basically, people kind of ridiculed Tournament Medic because of the existence of Healbot, but now that Healbot's going away, I think you're going to see a lot more Tournament Medic. And yeah, basically Warlock Paladin, I mean, they like pressing the dude button, right? They're a pretty slow deck, so I can see them just using Tournament Medic a lot more often. They're going to obviously use the Refreshment Vendor, so that's going to be an option for them going forward. So yeah, unless there's a way to replace Minibot and Muster and all that kind of stuff in the new expansion, that's going to be very difficult for, you know, mid-range Paladin to be able to survive going forward. Let's move on to Priest. So the Priest decks that were out there, Control Priest and Dragon Priest. And they had Zombie Chow, Deathlord, Dark Cultist, Valen's Chosen, Light Bomb, and I have in parentheses Museum Curator because, as I mentioned in part 2, a lot of the Death Rolls are going away, so Museum Curator is going to be much weaker. You might even see it cut from lists. So let's start off with Zombie Chow. Zombie Chow was used in Priest probably more than any other deck, so that's pretty painful. Obviously, the synergy with Akanai Soul Priest is going to be going away, and that kind of damage. That wasn't really the biggest deal, just the fact that you were able to get a board early and use things like, you know, Valen's Chosen or even Powered Shield on it to make it pretty annoying to deal with. Deathlord going away, I mentioned this earlier in part 2. I feel like Control Priest can still kind of survive. Same thing with losing Dark Cultist. As long as they get some sort of replacement in the new expansion, it should be okay. Valen's Chosen, I mentioned this as well in part 2. It's really kind of an underrated loss for Priest. just being able to have something, it was just so, it's just a fearful card, right? A feared card from the perspective of your opponent. It was one of the only ways you can use a minion that's already on the field, like a Northshire Cleric, and basically take control of the board and not have to constantly just use your removal, right? You can, for instance, if you get Northshire Cleric on the board, you use Valence Chosen, you kill a guy, they can't deal with it, you keep healing it, you gain cards, you snowball your way to a victory. That was one way that you could win a lot of games, and now that option is gone. That's one of your, basically, your win conditions for dealing with more aggressive decks. Life Bomb going away, it's not too big of a deal. It just allows you to play different cards like Shadow Madness, which is not really played, and it's a really strong card. And obviously, I mentioned Museum Curator before, not going to be something that can be played. But Control Priest should be fine. This is kind of painful to lose these, but they probably will be able to survive. A lot of options with them. Dragon Priest could be pretty strong again. Obviously didn't lose anything. All the dragons are still there. And you're losing Valence Chosen, which is kind of painful, but they're still pretty healthy minions, and you have all that synergy there. And basically the reason why Dragon Priest went away is because other decks got stronger. Not that it got any weaker, right? So I think Dragon Priest is going to make a comeback. It might be even a really strong deck, depending on maybe they add even more dragons and more stuff that Priest can use to make that deck pretty strong. So I think that Dragon Priest might make a comeback and might be one of the stronger decks, and Control Priest is probably going to be able to stick around. Let's move on to Rogue, and the archetypes I've listed here are Miracle, Oil, Mill, for you Mill Rogue lovers out there, and Raptor in parentheses. It's not the greatest deck. People try to make it work. I don't think it was very good in the first place. So, obviously Rogue lost Tinker's Oil, Shredder, which, not too big of a deal, I'll get to that later. Belcher, sometimes you put in the Oil Rogue. Healbot, it was used mostly in Oil Rogue. Lately you've seen it kind of cut. Loatheb is a card that I'm mentioning here because it's not as devastating as it is right now in Seeker Paladin, but it's still a really good way to set up future combos and future turns by having that Loatheb, by just kind of freezing your opponent for a second. So Loatheb was a pretty good option in Rogue. And also, you could set up a situation where you kind of burst on your opponent the following turn. So Loatheb is probably more painful for Rogue to lose than some other classes. And lastly, I have Egg and Creeper, which basically just kills Raptor Rogue by losing that. So yeah, let's just go over it. Obviously, Oil Rogue. The Oil Rogue, they call it Oil Rogue. It's more like a combo rogue. You're basically just drawing a bunch of cards and finding a way to Blade Flurry the crap out of your opponent, and then just dealing a bunch of damage. I feel like it's obviously not going to be called Oil Rogue anymore, but the basic concept of being a combo deck, I think is still going to be able to survive. Just need to get some other replacement for it. Maybe a weapon buff, maybe just a good weapon, not the crappy weapons that they received recently. Moving on to Shredder. Shredder is not really a big deal. I mean, one of the reasons why you put Shredder in Oil Rogue in the first place is because Violet Teacher had kind of anti-synergy with the Oil, because it would land on, the apprentice's spawn, and they couldn't attack right away, so people just put Shredder in there because it was very sticky. So that going away is actually not a big deal at all. You can just put the Violet Teacher and move on. And Healbot's kind of interesting, right? Because Rogue actually can't replace it too well, because I mentioned Tournament Medic before, and I still think that Tournament Medic is going to be pretty good, but obviously Rogue has a really bad hero power for Tournament Medic, and Rogue at some point wants to burst you down, so something like Refreshment Vendor isn't very good either. So even though we're already seeing Healbot being replaced by, Double Farseer, for instance, it's still kind of in a strange way pretty painful for Rogue to lose Healbot, because they don't have a great replacement like some of these other decks might be able to have with that Tournament Medic and the Refreshment Vendor. So that might be pretty painful for them. So in conclusion, Combo Rogue will still find a way to survive. Mill Rogue is obviously going to be able to stick around. Raptor Rogue is dead. It wasn't that great in the beginning. Alright, moving on to Shaman. Let me just take a drink here because I'm very thirsty after talking for so long. Moving on to Shaman. The only Shaman deck that's good right now is Aggro, and they lost Crackle. They also lost Whirling Zap-O-Matic, but that's not too big of a deal. Not every deck ran it anyway. You can just replace it with Knife Juggler. And now that Crackle's going away, you can kind of replace that with another strong 2-drop. It's not that big of a deal. Obviously, I just mentioned you can replace it with a minion and have a better chance of getting a better start. Obviously, it kind of removes some of the burst. One of the best things about Crackle, though, was being able to get rid of an annoying minion early on, right? You're playing against Warrior, and they play a Frothing Berserker or an Armor Smith, and you go, okay, go away, let's crackle this down, and keep hitting the face. Otherwise, it makes it really difficult to deal with. That's probably going to be the area where it's missed the most. But as long as it's replaced by something in the new expansion, I think it should still be fine. I mentioned this in part 2, but Aggro Shaman should still be a thing. It should still be a strong class going forward, unless there's measures put in to deal with it. Alright, let's move on to Warlock. Whew, Warlock has a lot of decks. Okay, so there's Zoo Warlock, which obviously can be kind of a Flood Zoo, or it can be mid-range Demon Zoo. There's Rena-Lock, there's Mally-Lock, obviously there's Hobgoblin Lock, which is going to be dead because there's no Hobgoblin, and Handlock kind of went away, but like I'll mention in a couple seconds, it's probably going to be making a comeback. So let's talk about some of the things that are going to be missing. For Zoo, it's going to be Nerubian Egg, Haunted Creeper, Implosion, Shredder sometimes. Shredder is mostly run in Rena-Lock. We had Zombie Chow run in Reno and Mally-Lock. And we had Belcher, which was run in those classes as well. Healbot as well. Dark Bomb, Loatheb, Voidcaller, Mal'Ganis. I guess I kind of have it in a weird order, right? Voidcaller, Mal'Ganis should be with the other Zoo cards. So, Mid-Range Demons Zoo is dead, right? I mean, obviously there's going to be Demons still, there's going to be Imp-Gang Boss, there's going to be the Doomguard, but there's not going to be any Demon synergy, right? With Mal'Ganis in there, with Voidcaller in there, that's not going to be a thing anymore. And the annoyingness of Zoo is going to go away, obviously, without the Nerubian Egg, without the Haunted Creeper. So some of the power is going to be going away. And Zoo might have to resort to just being an annoying deck that just floods the board as fast as possible and crosses their fingers that their opponent doesn't have any sort of removal for that. And Zoo is always going to be a thing. It might not be the strongest deck, but it's probably at least going to be tier 3 or above, just because it has Warlock has such a strong hero power. You're always going to be able to just put a bunch of small guys in your deck, tap away when you run out of cards, and just keep going. Play the Doomguard. Obviously, Doomguard could get nerfed, maybe, but you can always just play Doomguard when you run out of cards. It's still really good, so Zoo's always going to be a thing. And this is what I was talking about earlier with Freeze Mage. Basically, every single thing that Zoo had to deal with Freeze Mage is gone. Obviously, Freeze Mage was already a strong matchup against Zoo, but Zoo still won, 40% or above of the time. And now they've lost all their annoying Death Rattle minions. They've lost, included in that, obviously, is Voidcaller as well. They've lost Mal'Ganis, which is one of the ways that you can stop Freeze Mage from killing you, and in the later stages of the game, they have lost Loatheb, which is the bane of Freeze Mage's existence. They have lost... What else did they lose? And the other card... I'm totally drawing a blank here. They've lost... I'm drawing a blank, but you get the point. They've lost every single thing that they possibly had to deal with Freeze Mage. So, if Zoo is maybe a thing, or is maybe one of the stronger decks in the new expansion, or when the new expansion comes out, when the new format comes out, then Freeze Mage will be a very good way to counter it. If not, then we might see Freeze Mage kind of fall off. That's the point I kind of wanted to make. So Rena-Lock is obviously losing Implosion, is losing Dark Bomb. I mentioned this in part 2. It's going to be kind of difficult to deal with some decks. But again, without all the Death Rattles, you can probably use your AoE to better effect. And I think they'll still survive. I think people will innovate ways to make Rena-Lock work. I think Rena-Lock will stick around. Mally-Lock, no Healbot's a really big deal. Obviously you can replace it kind of with Refreshment Vendor and put a Brand in there. The thing is, Brand and Healbot was such a powerful combination that it really kind of worked like a Reno. And now without that, it's really hard to keep going. What my prediction is with this is that you're not going to see any more combo Malygos locks as far as you keep tapping until you get the combo and you kill your opponent. I think that Dragon Lock might be a thing now, and you just play for basically value, right? Because it's too painful to keep trying to draw into those options and keep going through your deck and not have enough healing to kind of sustain you. I think it's just going to be more kind of tempo focused and focus around that dragon synergy, which is kind of what Malilocks are doing nowadays. But yeah, I don't think Malilock, as far as Malygos being in Warlock, is going to be anything anywhere. It might just be some sort of big dragon or what have you. Renalock, I'm going to go back to Renalock just to mention that Healbot kind of hurts Renalock because there's no actual replacement for Healbot because they already run Refreshment Render. They already run all of the healing that there is. So there's no actual replacement for Healbot. I guess you could put it in tournament medic, but obviously it's a net even because you're not actually healing yourself. You're just not damaging yourself. And lastly, obviously Hobgoblin's dead, and Handlock might make a comeback. Handlock used Belcher, obviously, but Handlock was never really super dependent on it, right? Handlock's strength wasn't being able to get up huge taunts, put up big giants, and put up taunts in front of them, or basically taunt up those giants. And that was their form of defense, right? Having Healbot obviously helped a lot. Having Belcher helped a lot, but it's not going to hurt Handlock as much as it's going to hurt a lot of other decks, a lot of other, kind of control decks out there. Handlock, I call it control. Most of the time it's trying to control. Sometimes they just kill you, right? But I think Handlock will probably make a comeback. Let me just take another drink of water here. Alright, finally, Warrior. So the Warriors that are in existence right now are Control Warrior and Patron Warrior. Obviously, the big thing that they're going to be missing is Deathspite. Now, losing Deathspite, losing a weapon that you can just play on 4, which obviously they're not going to have anymore unless it comes into expansion, is pretty painful. But one of the biggest things you're losing is just the ability to kill something with 5 health on turn 5. Otherwise, if you think about it, you're not dealing with muster for battle, you're not dealing with creeper anymore. A lot of the utility of that whirlwind, other than obviously activating patrons, the utility of that whirlwind is not going to really be needed as much anymore. So it's not going to be as painful as I think people may be thinking. And this is kind of something that I thought of since yesterday. Moving on, Belcher, Lotheb, Unstable Ghoul, Shield Maiden. Kind of a mix there. Sorry about that. Belcher is in both. Lotheb is usually in both. Not as much in Control Warrior anymore. Shield Maiden obviously in Control Warrior. I mentioned this yesterday. I don't think Shield Maiden is that really important to Control Warrior. I think they'll survive without it. It's not too big of a deal. Unstable Ghoul, with Unstable Ghoul and Deathspite going away, the only remaining cards with Whirlwind effects, or stuff to really, basically a good way to activate patrons, are Whirlwind, Revenge, Pyromancer, and Mad Bomber, basically. So that really takes away the ability to spawn patrons. Obviously, you can't do it on turn 5 anymore. You can do it on turn 6 with Whirlwind, but it's not too likely to have that. On turn 7, you could go Patron plus Pyromancer plus Inner Rage, and that develops 4 patrons, so that's maybe a thing. But anyway, as far as predictions are concerned, Control Warrior will find a way to stick around. It will be seeing how good it is. It could, kind of fall down again. Control Warrior has kind of always been up and down as far as how good it is, but it's always stuck around. And Patron Warrior, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that the community is going to find a way to make Patron work. They're going to find a way. Pros love Patron. I don't know why, but the community is going to find a way to make Patron work. They're going to innovate something. Maybe use Pyromancer, maybe use some other card, but they're going to find a way to make it work, even though it seems kind of bleak for them. So that is it. We can review right now. In case maybe I forgot to make a prediction about something, here's the list of stuff that I think is going to stick around. So Aggro Druid and Combo Druid are sticking around, barring any sort of nerfs on the standard cards. Phase Hunter, Midrange Hunter are sticking around. Don't know how strong they are. They could be, tier 3 decks, but they're at least going to be somewhat competitive. Freeze Mage is probably going to be sticking around because of Zoo. Maybe it's good against other decks. We don't know. Warlock Paladin is still a deck that can stick around. You can just stick Tournament Medic in for Healbot. You'll be fine. Maybe Refreshment Vendor should be fine. Control Priest, still be a deck. Don't know how strong it is, but it'll still be a deck. Dragon Priest could make a comeback, and it's definitely going to be something that exists. It's going to be decent. Combo Rogue is going to stick around. Mill Rogue, it's not played that much right now, but it's not going to be weakened, obviously, at all by what's happened. And Aggro Shaman is going to be probably sticking around. Flood Zoo is always going to be a thing. Don't know if they're going to be able to recapture the ability to be a kind of a mid-rangey deck. Control Warrior sticking around. And lastly, I mentioned that Patron Warrior. I'm going to go on a limb and say that's going to stick around. The community is going to make sure of that. Now, the decks that are going to die. Mech Mage, dead. Temple Mage, probably dead. I don't feel the greatest about this prediction. Maybe it could still stay alive. But yeah, Grinder Mage, dead. Giants Mage, dead. I mean, you could make a Giants Mage, but at that point, you might as well play Handlock. There's no Echo. There's no Duplicate. So, yeah. Midrange Secret Paladin is dead, but maybe Aggro Secret Paladin can take its place. Midrange Paladin is dead, barring something from the new expansion. Raptor Rogue is dead. Midrange Demon Zoo is dead. Combo Mali Lock is dead, maybe replaced by some sort of Dragon Lock. And obviously Hobgoblin Lock is dead. And lastly, I have the last couple of comments here. Something that maybe comes back is Handlock. Not even maybe, it almost certainly will come back, Handlock. And I just have as a last note here, Dragon Paladin? Question mark? Maybe Dragon Paladin comes back. Dragon Consort's a pretty good card. And I mentioned this a bunch today, but I feel like unless there's a really good card that replaces Healbot, Tournament Medic, is going to be something that is really going to hit a lot of decks, and people are going to be putting that as a replacement. So, thank you very much. I know I rambled on for a long time. Hope you were able to kind of stick with me through all of that. I hope you enjoyed my predictions. Let me know what you think in the comments. Make sure you subscribe as well, and I will see you guys later.